Woodbury County's new law enforcement center opened in September of 2024. Today, there is still no public transportation to that facility, and the nearest bus stop is more than 2 miles away. In October of 2024, KTIV reported on conversations between the city and county to try and find a solution for people who need to get to and from the new LEC. KTIV's Connor Trett has an update on the progress of transportation.
Behind me is the bus stop at the Walmart on Floyd Boulevard here in Sioux City. Now, for folks who rely on public transportation and have business to attend to at the new Woodbury County Law Enforcement Center, this is the closest bus stop to that new LEC, about 2.8 miles away. Now, people who have to visit family members in the county jail, appear in court, or serve jury duty who would need to figure out another way to cover that distance to the new LEC. So what happened with conversations about public transportation options that started last year?
We had a lot of good ideas, whether we use vouchers. Having a bus route go out there daily is extremely expensive. And we never really talked about who pays for what, who does what. And it just kind of quieted down.
Moore says multiple options were explored to find a solution. In the spring of 2025, the city reached out to Siouxland Interstate Metropolitan Planning Council, SIMCO, and Siouxland Regional Transit System to see what a public transportation contract could look like and how often CERTs could provide rides to and from the LEC.
Some of the discussion that we had with the city was at least 3 to 4 different interval trips that we would take. And with those trips, we would be able to service their needs.
Pearson also said that CERTs talked about the estimated cost of those trips, $40 per one-way trip, regardless of how many people were on board.
So we could have up to 18 passengers. It would still be that, that $40 per trip. And we would also, depending on how deeper conversations would occur, we could look at if it was some singular trips, or very small volume trips, we could potentially negotiate even a much lower rate.
Moore said that sometime last year, conversations between the city and county quieted down. He said that he spoke with interim city manager Mike Collette about how often people needed accommodations.
He indicated that they don't get daily calls or even weekly calls. Now, once in a while, they will get a call about someone needing transportation out to the law enforcement center, but it's not on a regular basis.
With the estimated need for transportation fairly low, officials wondered whether the cost would be justified.
And I think people are finding a way to get there. Now, I don't know how inconvenienced that is for them, but the cost, I mean, it's a very high cost.
In Sioux City, Connor Trett, KTIV News 4.
KTIV also asked Pearson what he believes it would take to get the conversation going again. He said all it would take is a phone call. If conversations reopened, the Siouxland Regional Transit System could have bus services up and running between the bus stop and Floyd Boulevard and the LEC in just a matter of weeks.